The morning after the fire, Savannah Blake stood in the rain outside what used to be her apartment building, the blackened bricks still steaming behind the yellow caution tape. The fire marshal said it had started from faulty wiring in the neighboring unit and moved too fast for anyone to save much. She had escaped with the duffel bag, her phone, and the clothes on her back. No laptop, no files, no furniture, not even the tiny plant her best friend had given her on her first day of freelance. Just ash, smoke, and silence. Her hands were shaking as she scrolled through her contacts. She passed over old colleagues, exes, and friends she hadn't spoken to since college. Then she stopped at the name, Mom. With no other options, Savannah dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times before her mother answered, her voice clipped. "Savannah?" "Hey," Savannah said, voice hoarse. "There was a fire. My apartment's gone. I don't have anywhere to go." There was a pause. "Well, that's awful." Her mother didn't ask if she was okay. She didn't ask if she'd inhaled smoke or needed a ride. She just sighed. "So, what are you going to do?" Savannah closed her eyes. "I was hoping I could stay with you and Dad for a few days, just until I figure out next steps." The silence on the other end dragged long enough for a truck to drive by. "Savannah, this isn't a shelter," her mother said. "You're a grown woman. You should have savings, insurance. We've helped you long enough." "I paid your mortgage for 4 years," Savannah said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I sent Jason to private school. I covered your medical bills when Dad lost his job. I'm not asking to move in. I just need a place to sleep while I get on my feet." "You always dramatize," her mother replied. "We didn't ask you to do any of that. You offered. Don't throw it in our faces now." The line went dead. Savannah stared at the phone in disbelief. Then she called again. This time her father answered. "Savannah," he said, tone flat. "We heard. Your mom said you called." "I need help," she said. "Just a few days." "Your brother's got exams," he said, "and your mother's already on edge. You being here would only add to the stress." "So that's it?" she whispered. "You're leaving me homeless?" "I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're resourceful." The click of the phone disconnecting felt like a slap. Savannah didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, soaked to the skin, watching the rain wash down the street like it could carry away the humiliation. At 6 o'clock that evening, she sat in the front seat of her dusty Toyota Corolla, parked behind a 24-hour gas station. She had $1,372 in her checking account and 2 credit cards dangerously close to the limit. Her shoulders ached from the tension, her stomach hollow from not eating. But she didn't call anyone else. No one else owed her anything. The people who owed her had just proved they never thought of her as more than a wallet. Her phone buzzed. A text from her younger brother, Jason. "Heard about the fire. Hope this doesn't mess up Mom's credit card payments. LOL." She stared at the message for a long minute, then powered the phone off and dropped it on the passenger seat. For years, Savannah had believed that keeping her family afloat meant she mattered, that paying their bills gave her purpose. Now, she saw it clearly for the first time. They hadn't loved her. They had used her. She pulled the visor down and looked into the cracked mirror. Her eyes were red, her skin pale, but something shifted inside her, slow, steel-like. She wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. She reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a notepad. On the first page, she wrote in capital letters, "No one is coming, so I'm going to save myself." Then she made a list. Call insurance, cancel all auto payments to family bills, check local shelters, look up laptop rentals. Her fingers trembled as she wrote, but her spine straightened. Savannah Blake had lost everything, and yet, for the first time, she felt strangely free. That night, she slept in the back seat with a towel for a blanket and a paperback novel under her head. It was the most uncomfortable night of her life, and the beginning of a story no one in her family would ever believe. Not until they saw her name again. Not until she stopped being their bank. Not until she became someone else entirely. The morning sun cut across the windshield, sharp and blinding, as Savannah sat up in the back seat of her car, neck stiff, spine sore. Her breath made a faint fog against the glass, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Then the ache in her stomach reminded her. She hadn't eaten in almost 24 hours. The gas station had a small diner attached, and she used the last $6 in her wallet to buy a cup of coffee and a dry bagel. The woman at the register, older, with kind eyes and deep lines around her mouth, handed her a second bagel without charging. "You look like you've had a night," she said. Savannah nodded, suddenly too tired to speak. She found a corner booth and pulled out her notebook. The insurance claim process would take weeks, maybe months. She still had a few clients she could reach out to if she could borrow a laptop. Her phone was nearly dead. She scribbled numbers, crossed out ideas, circled the words, "Find stable shelter." At 10 a.m., she walked into the local public library. The carpet smelled like dust and old pages, and the computers had that familiar faint hum. She applied for a temporary workspace pass and sat down at a station. Her fingers hesitated above the keyboard. Then she began. Craigslist, Facebook groups, freelancer boards. She emailed 3 past clients explaining the situation. 2 replied within the hour with compassion. 1 even offered to prepay for a marketing strategy revamp. It wasn't much, but it was something. She used that advance to rent a room in a shared house across town. The room was barely bigger than a walk-in closet and smelled faintly of mildew, but it had a lock and a window and a thin mattress on the floor. Savannah laid down that night and stared at the ceiling, listening to the muffled bass of someone's music vibrating through the wall. She thought about her mother's voice saying, "We've helped you long enough," and felt her jaw tighten. Help? They had drained her for years. Rent, groceries, phone bills, Jason's student loans, Stephanie's gym memberships, Dad's gambling debts disguised as emergencies. She paid for birthday cakes she never got to eat, family vacations she wasn't invited to, and Christmas gifts she had no memory of choosing. And every time she hesitated, they reminded her how blessed she was to have a flexible job. As if her work wasn't real. As if freelancing meant unlimited time and unlimited money. Now, stripped of everything, she finally saw the full weight of what they'd done. The next morning, she opened a new bank account and changed her passwords. She canceled every automatic transfer that sent money to her parents' mortgage or Jason's tuition. She texted the family group chat with one sentence, "All financial support ends today." No one replied at first, but 12 minutes later her mother called. Savannah let it go to voicemail. Then the text came. "Mom, we need to talk. You can't just cut everyone off like this." "Dad, are you serious right now, after everything we've done?" Jason, LMAO, okay, enjoy your little meltdown. Stephanie, wow, so selfish. You always were. Savannah deleted the chat. That night, she applied for 2 part-time jobs, one at a bookstore, one at a local print shop. She didn't know how she would rebuild her business with no equipment and no network, But she wasn't going to let herself fall into that trap again. She needed routine, income, stability. At the bookstore, they hired her on the spot for weekend shifts. At the print shop, the manager, a woman named Diana, offered her 3 weekday mornings after seeing how Savannah handled a disgruntled customer during her trial shift. "You've got steel under all that polite," Diana said with a wink. "You'll do fine here." Savannah started to find rhythm. She would work mornings at the print shop, evenings at the bookstore, and carve out time on Sundays to rebuild her client base. Slowly, painfully, piece by piece. Every dollar earned felt different now. She didn't owe it to anyone. She didn't feel the quiet panic of her bank balance dropping from someone else's mess. It was hers, and it was enough. One Thursday afternoon, after her shift, Savannah walked to the payphone near the library. She had gotten into the habit of checking her voicemail from there. She had no desire to turn her phone back on. Most days there was nothing. But that day there was a message. Her father's voice, slow and tired. "Savannah, look, I don't know what's gotten into you. Your mother's upset. Jason's furious. Stephanie says you've gone insane. But if you think you're punishing us, you're only punishing yourself. Family sticks together. You don't just walk away." Savannah listened to the message twice. Then she deleted it. She didn't feel guilt. She didn't feel rage. She felt empty. Hollow in the best way. Like someone had scooped out all the manipulation and left space for something cleaner. That night, in her small room with a second-hand desk and a lamp that flickered when it got too warm, she wrote an essay. It was raw, personal, and honest. She titled it, "I Wasn't the ATM, Just the Only One with a Job." She sent it to an online magazine. A week later, they published it. It went viral. Comments poured in, people sharing their own stories of being financially exploited by the people they trusted most. Emails from strangers thanking her for saying what they couldn't. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Rachel who ran a network for women recovering from financial abuse. She invited Savannah to speak on a panel. "We need voices like yours," the email said. "Real, sharp, and brave." Savannah closed her laptop and stared out the window. Outside, the sky was turning pink. The world was still messy. Her bank account was still small, but her story was no longer trapped inside her. And for the first time in a long time, Savannah felt seen not as a source of money or convenience, but as a person with power, voice, and value. She wasn't going back. Not to that house, not to that role, not ever again. 3 months after the fire, Savannah Blake stood in front of her new apartment door, key trembling in her hand. It was nothing grand, just a one-bedroom walk-up on the edge of Montclair, New Jersey, but it was hers. No shared walls with strangers blasting music at 2 a.m. No mildew creeping up the closet corners. And most importantly, no one whose name was saved in her phone under Mom or Jason. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her, breathing in the faint scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. The rent was manageable thanks to her 2 jobs and the slow but steady trickle of freelance work returning. She'd purchased a refurbished laptop, borrowed an office chair from Diana's basement, and strung twinkle lights across the curtain rod to make the space feel less like a crash pad and more like a sanctuary. The article she wrote continued to circulate, shared on forums, Instagram posts, and podcasts. She received more emails from strangers than friends, mostly women, some men, all exhausted by the invisible weight of being the strong one in a family that only called when things broke. One night, Savannah was invited to speak at a small community panel at a nonprofit center downtown. She almost didn't go. Imposter syndrome clung to her shoulders like wet clothes, whispering that she wasn't qualified, that she was still sleeping on an air mattress and eating instant noodles. But she showed up anyway, wore a second-hand blazer, and stood beneath flickering lights in front of 30 fold-in chairs. Her voice cracked at first. Then it steadied. She told them about the fire, about calling home, about being denied a place to sleep in the house she'd paid to keep standing. She told them about waking up in the back seat of her car and realizing her entire value to her family had been transactional. When she finished, no one clapped. They just sat there silent, wide-eyed and still, until one woman finally raised a hand and whispered, "How did you forgive them?" Savannah blinked. She hadn't. She didn't know if she ever would, but she said, "I stopped waiting for them to say sorry, and I stopped letting my worth depend on their approval." Afterward, a man named Brian approached her. He was tall, soft-spoken, with dark curls and sleeves rolled past his elbows. He managed social media campaigns for nonprofits and had recently started a small firm to support women-owned businesses. "That part about sleeping in your car," he said, "that hit me hard. I did 6 months in mine after my mom sold my house while I was at college. Didn't know anyone else got left like that." They sat in the parking lot for an hour talking, swapping stories, sipping coffee from his thermos. She didn't expect anything more, but he called the next day, and the next week they met again. Slowly, he became part of her new normal, not fixing her, not saving her, just walking beside her with quiet understanding. As spring crept into summer, Savannah's business began to shift. A former client reposted her story, and suddenly she was flooded with inquiries from women looking for a rebrand, a new voice, someone who understood what it meant to rebuild not just a website, but a sense of self. She restructured her services, renamed her business Second Flame Creative, and moved her desk beside the sunniest window in the apartment. Clients paid on time. Meetings were on her terms. She no longer worked until 2 a.m. to fund someone else's emergencies. And then the letter came. A pale blue envelope slipped through her mailbox, no return address. Inside was a handwritten note in her mother's familiar script. Savannah read it standing in the kitchen with the fridge humming behind her. Her mother wrote that they were sorry not for what they did, but for how things turned out. She mentioned how difficult life had been without Savannah's help. The mortgage was months behind. Jason was thinking of dropping out. Stephanie was struggling with her mental health. "Maybe you could come for a weekend," the letter ended. "We miss your stability." Savannah folded the letter once, then again, and placed it in a drawer she no longer opened. It didn't enrage her. It didn't even hurt. It just confirmed what she already knew: they didn't miss her. They missed her money. That weekend, Brian took her to a lake 2 hours north. They sat on the dock, feet skimming the water, and she told him about the letter. He didn't offer advice, just listened. Then he said, "You know, not everyone gets out. You did. That's rare." Savannah watched a dragonfly skim across the surface, felt the sun on her skin, and nodded. "I'm not going back," she said, "not even for closure." He smiled. "Good, because I kinda like the woman you became when you stopped trying to earn their love." When they returned, Savannah pulled out her notebook, the same one she had in the car that first night, and flipped past the lists and calculations and scratchy motivational quotes. On a fresh page, she wrote, "I am not a resource. I am not a role. I am not a repairman for people who break themselves on purpose." She underlined it 3 times, then left the book open on her desk. The next day, she said yes to a retainer contract that would let her quit the bookstore. A week later, she stopped by Diana's print shop to drop off a thank you plant and walked away with a hug that felt more maternal than anything her own mother had offered in years. Savannah didn't feel whole yet, but she was building something real. And every time she told her story, she felt the shame loosen, the anger soften, and her voice grow stronger. Her family had left her behind, but in doing so, they gave her something they never intended, the chance to become herself. 6 months after the fire, Savannah Blake stood at the back of a ballroom in Manhattan, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor as she scanned the crowd. It was a gala hosted by Rise Forward, the nonprofit that had first invited her to speak. Tonight, she wasn't just an attendee, she was the keynote. A woman who had once slept in her car was now standing in front of 300 professionals, executives, and survivors, all waiting to hear her story. She still didn't quite believe it herself. The lights dimmed and her name was called. She walked slowly to the stage, the sound of applause surrounding her like a wave that didn't crash but lifted. As she reached the podium, her heart steadied. She didn't carry a speech. She never did. She had lived the words. 6 months ago, she began, I stood outside a gas station with soot in my lungs, $20 in my pocket, and nowhere to sleep. I had just lost my home and, in a more painful way, my family. Not because I did something wrong, but because I stopped doing everything right for everyone but myself. A quiet ripple moved through the room, eyes sharpened, postures leaned in. That night I wrote in a notebook, "No one is coming, so I'm going to save myself." And that sentence saved my life. She spoke about the silent debts women carry, the expectations we inherit without signing for them, the guilt baked into every no we try to say. She told them about the bagels, the rain, the library, the part-time jobs, the bitter silence of letting go. And then she spoke of the moment everything shifted, not when her story went viral, not when the checks cleared, but when she stopped believing she had to earn survival through suffering. When she realized she could matter even when she wasn't useful to someone else. After the speech, hands reached for her, not to take, but to thank. A dozen people said they saw themselves in her. A young woman whispered through tears that she'd just cut ties with her father the week before. A man with gray at his temples said he hadn't spoken to his siblings in 10 years and had finally stopped apologizing for it. As Savannah stepped away from the crowd to catch her breath, she felt someone watching her. Turning, she froze. Her mother stood near the entrance in a beige coat, fingers clutched around a wine glass she hadn't touched. Jason stood behind her, taller now, older, but with the same bored expression. They didn't clap, they didn't smile, they simply stared. Savannah didn't move toward them. She waited. Her mother approached first. "So," she said, "you're famous now?" Savannah smiled gently. "No, just honest." Her mother's face twitched. "You made us look like monsters?" "No," Savannah said. "I just stopped pretending you were saints." Jason shifted uncomfortably. "You didn't have to make it public," he muttered. "Neither did you when you posted memes about me on Facebook, calling me the drama queen." They fell silent. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then her mother sighed. "We want to talk, maybe fix things." "Why?" Savannah asked. "Because you miss me? Or because the world finally sees me, and that makes you uncomfortable?" Her mother opened her mouth, then closed it. "We didn't know you felt that way. You never asked," Savannah said, voice calm but firm. "You only noticed when the money stopped." Jason scoffed. "So what now? You're too good for us?" Savannah turned to him, meeting his eyes without blinking. "No, Jason. I'm just done bleeding, so you can stay comfortable." She stepped back, gently, respectfully, and added, "I hope you find your way. I really do. But I'm not coming back to help carry the load you won't lift yourself." Her mother blinked, stunned. Jason looked like he wanted to yell, but didn't, and then they were gone. Just like that. Savannah let out a slow breath. Brian appeared at her side, a glass of water in his hand, his eyes searching hers. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah, I think I finally am." They walked to the balcony where the city lights shimmered like scattered hope. Below them, taxis weaved between lanes, horns called out like restless birds, and Savannah felt the old version of herself dissolving into the wind. She wasn't the daughter who could never say no, the sister who paid everyone's way, the woman who kept sacrificing to earn a spot at a table that never had a seat for her. She was a business owner, a speaker, a survivor, and most of all, she was free. That night, as they rode the train home, Brian leaned his head against hers. "You know," he said, "you could write a book." Savannah smiled, eyes drifting to the window. "Maybe, or maybe I'll just keep living it." In the reflection, she saw not the girl from 6 months ago, but a woman who had walked through fire, slept in shadows, and still managed to rise with light in her eyes, not because anyone saved her, but because she finally saved herself.